Welcome friends, I'm Meredith and today we are going to do some holiday pie baking. I'm going to show you how I make crust from scratch. We're going to roast a pumpkin and I'll show you a few other pie recipes that I think you're really going to enjoy. So definitely stay tuned. If you're new here, I do all kinds of videos. I do cooking videos, but I also do unboxings and hauls here on my channel. So if that sounds like a good time, definitely hit the red subscribe button down below and we can hang out more often. And of course, don't forget to give this one a thumbs up. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I just cut a small pie pumpkin in half and I'm going to just go ahead and use a spoon to scrape the seeds out, just like this. It'll take a couple minutes. And then we're gonna go ahead and roast this in the oven at 400 degrees on a sheet pan with a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper. So I'm just gonna keep scraping until I can get all of this out. All right, so they are all scooped out and ready to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and transfer these to my baking sheet. You could absolutely line this with parchment paper to help save on dishes just a little bit. And we're going to use about a tablespoon of olive oil, so half a tablespoon in each one. And we're gonna brush that. This is just gonna help give it something for the salt that we're going to season it with to adhere to. And keep it also from sticking to the pan and from drying out. So I'm just using a silicone pastry brush to sort of spread that around, making sure I'm evenly coating the sides of my pumpkin. Then all we're gonna do is give this a few shakes of salt to bring out the pumpkin's natural flavor. Now if you're gonna use this in a savory dish, you could add pepper if you wanted. If you were going to make like a pumpkin soup or something like that. But since I'm using this as pie filling, we're not going to do that. Then I'm just going to put them upside down and just use the brush to kind of brush the rest of it. It does not have to be evenly coated. And then we're going to go ahead and bake these for probably about 35 minutes would be my guess. It's going to depend on the size of your pumpkin for sure, but this pie pumpkin is pretty small. So I'm going to get this in the oven. So roasting your pumpkin is absolutely something that you can do the day before Thanksgiving, and that will save you time. I would say you could even do it 2 days before if you wanted to. Puree it up and put it in the fridge, and then you'll be ready to go either the evening before or that morning if you bake your pies day of. The other thing I would say you could do ahead of time very easily is make your crust. So we're going to do that next. All right, let's get started on the pie crust. So we are going to use half a cup of water in a liquid measuring cup. We're going to use 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And we're going to put that in with the water and we're going to let that stand for 1 minute. So I'm going to go ahead and stir this up. Let that activate. And while that is working its magic, we're going to set that over here. We are going to, with this bowl of 4 cups of flour, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt and 1 tablespoon of sugar. I like having a sugar bowl handy. This one is from Target. It is part of the Hearth and Hand collection. You know, Joanna Gaines' collection. I think this is super cute. So I'm going to link any of the items that I use that I can find, as well as resources, links to the recipes, and or I will type them up in the description box depending on whether they are my recipe or one I found on the internet. So we're going to give all of our dry ingredients a quick stir. I'm just going to use my pastry blender because I already know I'm going to dirty that anyway, so why use something else? Okay, now we are going to go ahead and add in our shortening. I really like that the shortening actually has the measurements already on there, which is great. So I am going to use 1 3/4 of a cup of shortening, and I know that each of these sticks is 1 cup. So there's 1. And I already cut it off at the 3/4 mark to make our lives nice and easy. I'm going to put both of those in there. Now we're going to pour in the water and baking powder mixture now that the baking powder is dissolved. Making sure to get all of that in there. And now we're just going to go ahead and cut this together. And in a minute, we will add the rest of our ingredients. Now that I have it about halfway mixed, we're going to go ahead and add in 1 egg that is lightly beaten, as well as 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. Now you could definitely do freshly squeezed if you wanted to. I'm going to save a little bit of time, and this is something that I just already had on hand. So we're going to go ahead and use the bottle from the grocery store. Now this makes 4 9-inch pie crusts. So if you were going to do 2 fruit-based pies that both had, a top and a bottom crust, this will make 2 pies. Or if you don't use a top crust, you get 4. Now this will freeze well, so if you are making this recipe and, for example, you aren't going to use them all, you could absolutely save one of these pie crusts and make a quiche for Christmas breakfast, if you wanted to do that. Or it would also be great to save several of the pie crusts and make a turkey pot pie with some of the leftover turkey. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue mixing this up. If you are going to freeze it, I recommend rolling it out first, and then you could definitely put it in a large Ziploc bag with sheets of parchment between any crusts that you have left. I will also tell you that simply because this makes 4 pie crusts, you're definitely going to want to mix this up in a large bowl. Alright, so I have gotten the dough mostly to come together. I'm just sort of squishing it together a little bit with a spatula, and then we're going to flour the countertop and turn this out and knead it just a couple of times to bring the rest of the dough completely together. So we're going to go ahead and lightly flour our nice clean countertop here. And here we go. I definitely had to get my apron on because let me tell you, my shirt was getting covered in flour. I would say use an even bigger mixing bowl than this because this one was a little precarious. Alright, and now we squish the dough. A rather satisfying experience, if I say so myself. So let me know, what is your favorite Thanksgiving pie or holiday pie? Do you have a tradition every Thanksgiving or every Christmas that you always make, or that your grandma or your aunt makes every year? I would love to know. Definitely let us know. And bonus points if you link the recipe in the comments in case anybody else is looking for a good pie recipe. All right, this is mostly come together. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a knife and we're going to cut this into 4 equal portions. All right, I'm going to try and get these 4 about as even as I possibly can. Looks pretty good. All right, and now I can start rolling out my dough. So let us know if you have a secret for how you roll out your pie crust. Do you roll them out and then use the quarter fold and then place it in your pie tin, or do you roll it out between sheets of parchment? What do you do? Alright, so I went ahead and rolled them each into a ball and flattened them into a disc just to make it a little bit easier when I go to roll them out. But because these have raw egg in them, I'm going to go ahead and put the ones that I'm not currently rolling out right into my fridge just for food safety purposes. So I'm just putting them in containers and I'll stick the lid on. I have refloured my countertop because that is a mistake I have made in the past of going to roll it out and realizing that it's sticking because I didn't add another layer of flour. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my rolling pin to roll this out. And I always like to keep my pie plate that I'm going to use nice and handy so I can really measure the size as I'm rolling it out. So I have a bunch of different pie plates, but I do have some from Pyrex that I really like. And that's what I'm going to use for this one. I feel like they're just a little bit deeper than some of the other pie plates that I have, which I think is especially good if you're going to do like an apple pie, because I don't know about you, but I like lots of apple filling inside of my pies. So, fun fact, my husband and I actually had pie at our wedding instead of cake. Did you know that? We had a whole bunch of different flavors of pie. We both like cake just fine, but one of our date nights was going to Baker Square quite often because there was one not far from the high school that my husband went to, and so we just ended up going there. We also had a good friend who worked as a waitress there, so we had a lot of pie dates, and so it just kind of made sense for us to do that. And then I've also made pies for other friends' weddings, so that was really fun. I enjoyed that a lot. My pie crust was heading toward the camera as I was rolling. So anyways, I think it's a good idea to just kind of push your edges, kind of keep them together as you're going. Otherwise, you can tend to get a really funny pie crust shape as you go. And then we're going to go ahead and use my pie plate, and I'm going to flip it over and just see if that is ready. We definitely need it to be a little bit outside of the pie plate, so I'm going to keep rolling. So I like to keep a little dish of water so that if I have any cracks in my pie crust that I want to try and work back together, I can do that. Especially if you have really dry air, sometimes that can make a difference. And I've got a little crack right here as well, so I'm going to glue it together, as it were. So, do you use store-bought pie crust or do you make your own? I will say many a times in my life I have used a store-bought crust, and sometimes I'm feeling fancy and I make my own. I just pulled my roasted pumpkin out of the oven, and I took my oven mitt and just made a little squish in the center, and it caved in right away, which means it is nice and soft and done. So now that my pie crust is pretty close to the size of my pie pan, just a little bit outside of the shape of it, I'm actually taking a spatula and just going right under my pie crust to make this so much easier to get off the counter. Now you could definitely fold it in quarters like I was talking about, or you can just slide your spatula underneath as well as a hand, and very carefully and gently slide it right over into your pie plate, just like that. The key is to flip your pie crust at least once while you're rolling it out so that it doesn't get a chance to stick to your counter, and also reflour it. And just using like a pancake turner or a spatula to flip it around makes it all worth it. So I'm going to go ahead and just press this into the pie plate and get it nice and even. Now I'm just going to go ahead and clean up the edges of my pie crust with a paring knife. And then you can definitely use this pie crust if you want to roll back out a little bit and cut out any cute decorative shapes if you wanted to. Maybe some fall leaves if you happen to have a leaf-shaped cookie cutter, or a pumpkin if you wanted to put one in the center of your pumpkin pie. Depends on how fancy you want to get. And then I can just also use any of those pieces to fill in any spots in my crust. And voila, my pie crust is ready to go. All right, now we're going to go ahead and make the filling for our pie. This one, we are going to make a sugar cream pie. So for this recipe, you are going to need 1 cup of brown sugar, tightly packed, 1/3 of a cup of all-purpose flour, and we're going to go ahead and whisk this together, breaking down any large clumps of brown sugar and evenly incorporating the two together. So really work on those clumps. Make sure there aren't any big chunks in there, because you don't want to end up with large chunks of sugar in your creamy, delicious, hopefully very smooth pie. So my grandmother used to make something that she called sugar pie, and she never wrote down the recipe, so none of my aunts have it, unfortunately. And she always just did it apparently by sight, and when it was the right consistency, she'd bake it. And so this is what my aunt thinks is as close to it as we are going to get. So write down your recipes, friends. Your grandchildren and your daughters might thank you later. So I'm just going to continue to break this down until it's as smooth as I can possibly get it. Someone realized Mom was filming and decided she needed to help, right? You cooking? Mm-hmm. Okay, you're going to stir that up. So while River is stirring that up, I have 2 cups of 1/2 in a liquid measuring cup.
I did, Mama.
Yeah, you're stirring, that's right. And to that, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. I'm just going to eyeball it.
In here?
In this one. All right. And then we're going to combine here in just a second when someone's had enough of a turn.
But I cooking, Mama.
You're cooking. Say hi to the friends.
No. Let's clean the mess.
Yeah, clean the mess. Okay. You want to say, don't forget to give it a thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
Say, give it a thumbs up.
Oh. Not this finger.
Not that finger? Is it this one? This finger is thumbs up.
Thumbs up is not for real.
So now we're going to go ahead and pour our flour and sugar mixture right into the bottom of our pastry-lined pie crust. We're just going to go ahead and smooth that out as evenly as we can get it.
I want to.
You want to do it? River's going to do it a little bit.
So in my hand.
Yeah, is it messy on your hands? Yeah, a little bit gets on your hands. That's true. And then we're going to go ahead and pour the cream mixture over it after giving it just a slight whisking.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to go ahead and pour the 1/2 and vanilla mixture right over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to dot this with 2 tablespoons of butter. All right, so I've got my 2 tablespoons of softened butter, and I'm just going to cut that into little pieces and dot the top of the pie crust, or the top of the pie with the butter. And then we're going to go ahead and bake this in a 350-degree oven for, I believe it is 50 minutes, but I'm going to double check my recipe. So I'm just going to keep dotting with butter.
Mama, calm down, calm down.
Calm down? I didn't think I was that excited. I mean, I get pretty excited about pie. Here is the sugar cream pie fresh out of the oven. It is looking so good, and I can't wait to dig in. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a quick overview. I'm going to use my Oster food processor to go ahead and puree this pumpkin, which came out of its shell so easily. It just peeled off like nothing. So I'm just going to dump this in here, and I'm going to grab a spatula. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and puree this, but I'll save your ears the noise. And there it is, all pureed up and ready to go. Let's get started on the filling for the pumpkin pies. So this recipe does make filling for 2 pies, just so you know. So that is the pumpkin that I roasted. This is an organic pie pumpkin that I roasted myself, and then there was not enough from that tiny pie, so I did have to substitute with a little bit of canned pumpkin. You can definitely tell the color difference. So anyways, just thought I'd point that out to you guys. River here, my cooking assistant, is making faces, and she's also beating the eggs for us. So now to this canned and home roasted pumpkin, we are going to add 1 cup of brown sugar. And, well, don't put your fingers in there. Okay, we're all done with this. We're going to put it in. Give me the fork. We're going to put this in the big bowl. Ready? Dump it all in there. Good job.
Good job.
Then to that, we are going to add 1/2 cup of evaporated milk. You want to do it? Okay. And then we're going to add 1.5 cups of milk. We're using 2%. You could use whole or skim, whatever you have.
Wow, so many.
And I do recommend mixing it in a pitcher of some type. If you have one, it's going to make it so much easier to pour the filling, which is pretty runny, into your pie plates. Just saves a lot of hassle. Now, to this, we're also going to add 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. You could add a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg if you want to. I'm not a big fan of nutmeg, so I don't put it in. And then we're also going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So this is my great-grandmother's pie recipe. Hold on, River. So, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And now we're gonna go ahead and whisk this. All right, so I have both of my pie plates ready to go. This one I just used my fingers and pinched on one side and pushed with the other finger like this as I went around the pie shell. And that's how I got that type of design. So if you're feeling fancy, you can do it that way. Otherwise, you can just smooth out the edges and I will not judge you at all. Let me tell you. Some days you just don't feel like being fancy. All right, so my pie filling is whisked up and ready to go. We're gonna pour it into our pie shells. We're gonna bake these for 60 minutes at 350 degrees. Until a toothpick comes out clean, and then we're good to go. So I think I was talking about this earlier, but I don't know if I mentioned it. I only got about 1 cup's worth of pureed pumpkin from that very small pie pumpkin that I had that I roasted myself. So if you're going to make this recipe, you are probably going to need 2, maybe even 3. I think if they weren't quite as small as mine, you might be just fine. So I do have a little bit of filling left over, so I could absolutely stick that in a little ramekin. If you have someone who is gluten-free in your family, you could absolutely bake it and bake it like a custard instead, and get a similar result with just no crust. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick these in the oven and I'll show you what they look like when they come out. I just pulled the pies out of the oven, so here is what they look like. As you can tell, they are still bubbling a little bit because they are nice and hot. I did cook the ramekin for 45 minutes, and that was definitely plenty of time, and the pies got 1 hour. And here is what it looks like. There is the glorious slice of pumpkin pie with a little bit of whipped cream on top. And now for my taste testers.
First off, happy Thanksgiving to all you folks out there watching this. And do the taste test.
Yeah, I went to outside. Want to.
This is really good. I feel like it's a little bit creamier than usual. But
Why?
Okay, a little creamier than usual. River, what do you think? Is it good?
I want milk in there.
You want milk? Okay.
In my cup.
Okay. All right, a sippy cup of milk has been procured, so we have a happy toddler. And Carl isn't a big fan of pumpkin pie, so he's having some frozen fruit with whipped cream, right, Carl?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sugar.
All right.
Good.
And now it's time for our bite.
No, wait, time for the time.
Here we go, guys. Looks good. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I'll leave all of the recipes either linked or typed out in the description box below. And of course, don't forget to have a beautiful Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys. Say bye.
Bye.